All right, good morning, everyone. It's 10:40 on my watch, so I'm gonna go ahead and get started so I can honor your time. First of all, I want to thank you for being here with us at the PSJA Educational Technology Virtual Conference. This session is titled Making Personalization Pedagogical Choices to Differentiate Instruction. My name is Mr. Eduardo Guzman Gonzalez, and I'm part of the PSJA Dual Language Department. So I will be rolling out this session for us. I'm going to be toggling through some windows here, so I apologize. I hope I don't, make you dizzy or anything like that. But I do appreciate you being here, and let's go ahead and get started. So for our agenda, we will have the welcome and introduction, which we just did, and then we're going to be looking a little bit into the introduction of differentiated instruction to a Kahoot activity. We're going to talk a little bit about the preconceived ideas about differentiated instruction. That is going to be used through a Google form questionnaire. However, for this session, we're not going to use the Google form because we're not all part of the same school district, and the sharing can be a little confusing. So it's just an idea for you if you go ahead and turn around this session at your district. Then we're going to be looking briefly at what is differentiated instruction and what are three differentiated instruction protocols, right? So we need to know a little bit about the framework, but then the protocols is really what's important, as well as how do we roll it out in a classroom. Then for the independent practice, I'm going to give you a little bit of time, pretty much a good chunk of time, to work on an infographic. As you can see, as you'll see later on in our presentation, you will have a couple of options on how to do that. And then we'll have our closing activity and, of course, any questions. So before we get into it, I just want to make sure that the technology from PSJ, are we okay to begin? Can you see my screen? Can you hear me? Is the chat available for our participants? Can I get a response to that, please? Can someone unmute and tell me if you can see my screen and you can hear me?
I can see your screen and I can also hear you.
Great, thank you so much for the confirmation. I appreciate it. All right, folks, so let's go ahead and get started. Now, for this session, you will need access to the following: the Padlet, which I will share with you, the Google Forms, as I mentioned, it's just an idea for you to use in your district, Kahoot, which I'm going to host live, so I'll show it on the screen in a little bit, the full electronic bundle of the resources. We will provide you with a PDF copy of the PowerPoint. That's going to be in our chat right after our session, so you will have access to that. And then lastly, a learning log. So this comes from Avid. Some of you may be familiar with like the Cornell notes. Well, this is very similar to that. And it's just a place where you can jot down some notes from our session. You can do it electronically, you can do it manually. So as long as you have somewhere where you can take some notes to our session, because you are going to need a recap of the info for your independent practice. So our session objectives, the content objective for this morning is that by the end of the session, I will review the definition of differentiated instruction and apply my learning to a series of checking for understanding strategies to different modalities of technological applications. So really, the emphasis, we're looking into the lens of the tech, right? What technology applications do you have available that you can implement in your classroom, or turn around and train staff members that they can implement in their classrooms. Our language objective: by the end of our session, I will demonstrate my comprehension skills by answering a set of questions and creating an infographic that shows a synthesis of the information presented. So I'm not going to share too much information for the sake of time, right? We only have an hour this morning, but I will give you the definition, 3 protocols, and what you're going to do is you're just going to synthesize that information and transfer it over to an infographic of your choice. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with our Kahoot activity. And again, I'm open to support. So if you see that I'm doing something the long way, perhaps you can just unmute yourself and let me know, hey, Mr. Usman, there's an easier way to do this. I'm okay with that. So if you can use your laptop or your cell phone, where we're going to get our pin. There we go. Please use the game pin to go ahead and join. Thank you, AM. I appreciate you. Thank you, MO. Thank you, Tijerina. AM, I see you. Great. Bere. Now, while the rest of our peers are logging in, there we go. I see them coming in. Of course, this is without giving you any background knowledge on deficient instruction, so you can probably know that this is just to kind of get us into the topic, and this is a great activity that you can do with your students as well, or if you're a coach, you can also use this with staff members. And it's a great way to check for understanding, especially if you're going to cover something new, for example. It allows you to evaluate or examine what sort of background your participants have when it comes to this topic. So we have eight people on here. Let's go ahead and just get started. Second question. Good job. Oh, you got it correct. You got Cruz, AM, and SM in places 1, 2, 3. Good job. Last one. Good job, folks. The majority of you got it correct. So here's our podium results. Third place, we have JM. Congrats. MO in second, and then in first place, we do have SM. So congratulations. I appreciate your participation. Again, it's a nice way for us to get into the topic at hand. All right, so for the preconceived ideas of differentiated instruction, this is where I said about the Google form. This is highly recommended if you're using it in your district. But for now, just use your learning log and answer the following statement. Since we are close to lunchtime, write down what would you like to be your ideal lunch choice. List the items you like as listed below. So what would be an appetizer that you would want, an entree, a dessert, and a drink? Whatever you want, just go ahead and write it down in your learning log. I'll give you a couple of minutes to work on this. One more minute, and then I'm going to have two of you share out. So again, what would be your ideal choice today, Saturday, August the 16th? What would you like as an appetizer, an entree, for dessert, and to drink? All right, so let's have two of you present. You can unmute yourself and just let us know out loud what's on your palette this morning. So participant number one, please share with us. Okay, since nobody's volunteering, we're going to go with the initials that I remember from Kahoot. So let's go with AM. AM, can you unmute yourself and just let us know what you wrote down for these, please?
Good morning, Mr. Guzman. Yes.
Good morning.
I don't know where the questionnaire is, but I can verbally tell you what they are.
Okay.
Perfect. So then for the appetizer, I think, and we're talking about real food, right?
Right.
Okay, for appetizer, I'd say a side of calamari,
Mm-hmm.
an entree, some kind of shrimp pasta with a lot of vegetables.
Great.
A dessert, maybe a cheesecake, no topping, and then a drink, a Coke Zero.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you sharing. All right. And for the next volunteer, we'll have, I believe, SM was on the podium, so we'll have SM share out. SM, can you share out? If not, we can have MO. I believe that was another initials that we saw there.
Hey, good morning. For my
Morning.
appetizer, I would like cheese sticks.
Mhm.
My entree would be buffalo wings, dessert chocolate cake, and a drink, a Dr. Pepper.
Thank you so much, ladies, for volunteering and sharing with us. Now, the concept of differentiated instruction, me as your host, right, for this luncheon, the idea is that I would have to specifically serve you what you want, right? So we have AM, which I think I recognize the voice. It's a friend of mine. So I would have to give AM exactly what she requested for her appetizer, her entree, dessert, and drink. Same thing for, I believe it's MO or SM. I'm not sure which one you are, miss. But again, I would have to serve you exactly what you want. Now, when we think of differentiated instruction, that's sort of what we think, right? When we think about differentiated, it's to meet the needs of every learner. Now, in this context, it's a little bit different from an educational context. However, if I want to differentiate for all of you, that's what I would have to do. I would either send a survey, I would give you a sheet of paper, write down what you want to eat for your appetizer, the entree, dessert, and drink. Hopefully with time, so when the day comes, I have specifically everything that you want, right? That's the ideal. However, we do realize that as teachers, as educators, we are dealing with a large number of students in some instances, right? We have perhaps over 100 students. So what you're probably thinking to yourself, okay, Mr. Guzman, do you really expect for me to differentiate for 120 students? Let's say. It becomes quite challenging, right? And it may cause for us to feel burned out pretty quickly. So what I want for you to think about is this, right? When we go somewhere to eat, we usually get this. And this is just a generated image from the internet. It's not specific to what you're asking. However, is this location or this business differentiating for their customers? Can someone just say yes or no and why or why not?
I would say yes,
Because
because they have different options that you can choose from.
very good. Thank you so much for sharing. That's the idea, right? Is we cannot ask every single student, okay, tell me what you need so I can go ahead and differentiate every single week or every other day once the content changes our objectives, right? But one thing that differentiation instruction does, it allows students options. So as educators, we have to think about it in terms of a lunch menu, right? You already know what you're going to be teaching, and you already know what the objectives and the outcome of that lesson or that unit is going to be. So we work backwards, right? When they say we work backwards, is what options are you going to allow your students to produce to ensure that they understand the content, that the processes, right? Like a graphic organizer, if they're visual learners, or video, something like that, and how you're going to assess the products. So thank you so much for sharing now. And this is now we get into a little bit about what is differentiated instruction. So the slide states differentiated instruction strategies adapt teaching to address students' unique learning abilities. So that right there from the beginning can be a little misleading, right? Because some of us may think, okay, I have to look at every student because every student is unique, and we know that's true. Also, they have different styles and readiness levels, right? Not everybody is at the same readiness level. So instead of using a one-size-fits-all approach, differentiated instruction tells us that teaching and learning practices are modified to match the needs of students in today's diverse classrooms. So this approach to differentiated learning transforms how teachers deliver content, engage students, and assess. So that's something that I mentioned in the previous slide, right? How are you going to deliver the content when everybody's unique? How do we engage the students? So like what processes are you using during the lesson rollout to ensure that you engage the students, and then assess understanding? So that could be a check for understanding. It doesn't always have to be summative, right? It could be formative even throughout that class period. So differentiated instruction involves adjusting the content, the media and methods that teachers use to impart and instruct skills, ideas, and information. So this is very important. Is the content being comprehended by the students to begin with, right? So as teachers, we have to plan accordingly. The processes, the exercises and practices students perform to better understand that content. So in your district, or you may have a curriculum that breaks it down for you, and it follows a certain lesson cycle. So in that lesson cycle, right, there's activities, there's check for understandings, that while you're showing the content or delivering the content, rather, you're checking for understanding throughout to ensure that the processes that you planned are working. And then the products, the materials such as tests, projects, students complete to demonstrate their understanding. So it's so vague and so open-ended that the really good thing about differentiated instruction is that it does give you autonomy as the teacher, the facilitator in that classroom. Okay, so my recommendation for you, ladies and gentlemen, is to either take a picture of this slide, type it out on your learning log, because again, you will need it for your infographic. So I'll give you about a minute to just make sure that you save this slide, this information. Great. Okay. So we talked a little bit about the meaning in a simple form. It really comes down to 3 different components: content, process, and check for understanding assessment, right? Those 3 things are very important when it comes to making sure that the students are comprehending the content as well as developing their language. I'm sorry, I come from the dual language program, so we always look at things from content and language development. So there's 3 differentiated instruction protocols that allow for student-centered learning, and they are learning station, task cards, and interviews. So this is where I'm probably going to need your support, ladies and gentlemen, because I have a Padlet, and I want to, of course, share it with you so we can all see it. And I believe that the way I can share it to the chat is by copying this link. Is that correct? Let's try it. Is this her chat right here? See if you're able to open it. And somebody let me know, please.
Yes,
You're able to open it?
yes, I did.
Great, thank you so much. So if you look at the 3 columns here in the Padlet, we have the definition and the explanation. So for us visual learners, or for you visual learners, we do have a little graphic here under the first column. It talks about content, process, product, and effect. We didn't discuss effect, but that's also another component of it. And what you have here is you do have the definition and the explanation for your reference. Now, in this part of our presentation, we are focusing on the protocols. So as you see here, the first protocol is the learning stations. And what learning stations do, and you can follow along with me on the screen as I read it, you can read it silently or you can read it out loud if you have some privacy or if you're not embarrassed. But let's start reading in 3, 2, yes. And let's start reading in 3, 2, 1. Learning stations provide different types of content by setting up learning stations, divided sections of your classroom through which groups of students rotate. You can facilitate this with a flexible seating chart or plan. Each station should use a unique method of teaching a skill or concept related to the lesson. Students can rotate between stations that involve responding to a video, creating artwork, reading an article, solving puzzles, or participating in teacher-led explorations. Okay, so this is learning stations. I'm going to give you 2 minutes to reread it to yourself, internalize the information, and then I'm going to ask you a question. So at 11:06, we'll come back as a whole group. All right, that's been 2 minutes, probably a little bit less because it did switch to 11:05 a little bit early. But if you see here under the protocol, there's an add comment. Answer the following question. How have you used learning stations in your classroom to support student learning? How have you used or seen, or how you think based on the information in front of us, how having learning stations in your classroom or in a classroom will benefit students? Just click on the add comment. And then once I get a few comments, we'll go ahead and move on to the second protocol. How have you seen, how have you used, or how do you think that learning stations can benefit students in the classroom? It's an open-ended question, so there is no right or wrong answer, ladies and gentlemen. How have you seen? How do you think? Or how have, let's see, we have one answer. Thank you so much, Polite Hamster. That's a great idea. And thank you for contributing. They learn from each other for better grasping of the lesson. Ms. Garza, I have seen a bio class teacher using stations to review content previous to the exam. It's a great way. Thank you, Ms. Garza, for participating. As long as you have one more, we can move on to the second one. So as you can see here in the protocol, and it's just to allow our colleagues and our peers to contribute. It says here that students can rotate stations that involve a variety of different ways, right? So responding to a video, creating artwork, reading, solving, or participating in teacher-led exploration. So this is the work that we do behind the scenes, right? So by the time our students come into our classroom that day, you're gonna have learning stations. You as the educator or us as the educators, we do the behind the scenes planning, right? When we think, okay, what are my learning sessions going to be like today? What is the objective? It's always connected to the objective and also the language, right? So there has to be work and intentional planning along the way. Thank you, E. Thank you, JM. Stations allow teachers to tailor tasks to different learning levels, interests, and needs, so all students can engage meaningfully. Thank you so much. Learning stations help students learn at their pace and have a choice in which material they use to learn. Thank you so much, E. All of you have insightful information, and they truly can support our students. All right, let's look at the differentiated instruction protocol number 2. Use task cards. So you have an image here, task badge 4, right? And it's kind of like a to-do list. So let's read the information together, and then I'll give you 2 minutes to reread the information to process it, and then if you can contribute to the messaging, to the comments. So like learning state, let's read together in 3, 2, 1. Like learning stations, task cards allow you to give students a range of content. Answering task cards can also be a small group activity, adding variety of classes that normally focus on solo or large group learning. So how do we use task cards in our classroom? First, you make or identify tasks and questions that you typically find in your curriculum. Again, you don't have to come up with something out of air. If you have a curriculum for you, you already have some of the information there. Second, print and laminate cards that each contain a single task or question. Now, for this part, maybe printing and laminating isn't feasible, right? And maybe it's not an option, But the point of this technology is to be able to use like a Padlet, for example, right? So we have other mediums that we can use and that we don't have to maybe rely on physical products as much. If you do have access to those resources, great. We love that. And then finally, set up stations around your classroom and pair students together to rotate through them. You can individualize instruction by monitoring the pairs, addressing knowledge gaps when needed, and you can also have various levels of task cards to further differentiate per student. So that's us reading it together. I'm going to give you 2 minutes. It's 11:11. Some of you know what that symbolizes. And at 11:13, we'll go ahead and start adding comments to the task cards. Okay, it's 11:13. So for the protocol number 2, task cards, the question is, do you see yourself implementing task cards in your classroom? It's either yes or no, and just provide a simple explanation as to why, please. Do you foresee yourself using task cards in your classroom? Yes, no, and why? Again, just a simple explanation. Again, for the comment, you can add text, you can add an image, you can add a meme, anything that conveys the message that you're trying to say. Right, we do have options and we love that. As long as I have 3 comments, we can move forward to the next protocol. Polite hamster, yes, they care a quick way to have students apply the skills of the week. Good job. Thank you so much. We have confident Buffalo. Yes, students are given more time to think and answer at their level of understanding, gives them ownership of their work. I love that, Buffalo. Thank you. And then we have Sleepy Crane. Apparently it's not too sleepy because it's participating, so thank you. Yes, it will give students another option to learn new words. So you are correct. Thank you for again providing some information, some insights. JM says, yes, it is the task cards help for review and check for understanding. You are correct. Now, okay, I'll get back to this after protocol 3. So thank you so much for participation. Let's look at the last one. DI protocol number 3, interview students. So again, we're going to read it together, and then I'll give you 2 minutes to internalize the information, and then ask a guiding question for the comments. So interviewing students. Asking questions about learning and studying styles can help you pinpoint the kinds of content that will meet your students' needs while running learning stations or a large group activity. Pull each student aside for a few minutes and ask about their favorite types of lessons, what are some of their favorite in-class activities, which projects they're most proud of, which kinds of exercises help them remember key lesson points. So these are some of the questions that you can ask the students when you pull them aside in whole group or while they're doing group work. So how do you do this? You track your results to identify themes and students with uncommon preferences, helping you determine which methods of instruction suit their abilities. If individual interviewers are not possible, give a paper or electronic survey at the beginning of the year to quickly capture this information from all your students at once. So at 11:18, I'll ask the guiding question. Go ahead and read it again and internalize the information. Okay, it's 11:18. Thank you so much for getting ahead. Let's see what Sleepy Crane has to say. It will allow you to see which activities students enjoy and are engaging. Correct. Mrs. Rodriguez says, I believe that having rotations in my classroom provides a different way for students to learn by having conversations between each other and sharing ideas in different ways. And thank you so much, Mrs. Rodriguez. And that was a guiding question. How and why, not how, why is it important to interview students, right? Either at one time at the beginning of the year, when you're doing group work and you're listening to what the students are saying, like they're saying, right, they provide different ways for students to learn. So as a facilitator, when we're walking around listening to what they're saying, what do we do with that information when it comes to planning, right? So if you can just kind of provide some information here on how listening to what the students like, what works for them, what's effective, what keeps them engaged. Why do you think that's beneficial as a teacher when rolling out lessons, right? So anything like Mr. Rodriguez, Sleepy Crane, and Polite Hamster says, it gives us the opportunity to get to know our student learning practices. Correct. You are correct. And as I right, our goal is to be able to learn what works for our students so we can provide the support that they require. All right, thank you so much for that. Go back to our PowerPoint, our presentation. And this is perfect timing for our differentiated instruction infographic. So this is an independent practice. So let's read the directions. So using the Canva platform, create an infographic that lists, and this is what you need to know, the definition of differentiated instruction, and you have it in your Padlet. A minimum of 2 differentiated instruction protocols, we went over 3 this morning, and answer the reflection question. Once you have completed your infographic, please email it to the email on the screen or attach it as a direct message on our Teams so I can go ahead and keep those and use them throughout the year as I roll out presentations. So if you don't have Canva, ladies and gentlemen, Word will also suffice, right? Anything that you have available to you will work. I just wanted to use Canva because a lot of our staff members at PSJA have access to Canva through our district. So if you're not part of our district, you can use Word. And if we go back to our infographic, our Padlet rather, it's here. In the third column, you do have an example of an infographic. I just got this one from the internet, right? And you have the directions here as well. So again, select an infographic template using Canva or Word and answer the following 3 statements. Write an explanation in your own words on the meaning of differentiated instruction. You can use the first column, read the information, and just explain it in your own words. Number 2, identify, it says 3 here, but you can use a minimum of 2, and you have 3 of them here in the second column that you can implement, and explain how they are implemented in a classroom. And then the reflection is, why do you believe differentiated instruction is beneficial for all teachers and students, right? For teachers to implement it, and for students for their learning. So either you can add it here in the comment, or you can email it to me or put it in the chat. We have 3 different ways. So I'm going to take about a minute to answer any of your questions for the independent practice. So the floor is open. If you have a question, please unmute yourself and ask me, and I'll try my best to answer your question. Okay, we don't have any questions. It's 11:22. I'm going to give you some time to work independently. So we'll come back at 11:32. Okay? And I'll be here if you have any questions. We have about 2 minutes remaining, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, it's 11:32. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go check the Padlet to see if anybody submitted something there. Okay, we have the eager. Depiction instruction allows you to find a method to assist the struggling students. Yes, you are correct. We have fabulous pigeon. The differentiated instruction is beneficial for everybody. We provided what the students need. You are correct. Flower, it is beneficial for the teacher, finding lessons by providing a variety of ways to engage the students. Great. JM says differential instruction is beneficial for teachers because it helps them meet diverse student needs, maximize engagement, and improve learning outcomes while also making teaching more effective, flexible, and rewarding. And you are correct. Under the protocols here, we didn't get a chance to look over the information from Unique Finch, who says we know our students and we can provide immediate feedback. Yes, ma'am, or yes, you are correct. Apologize for that. Okay, so again, the infographic, here's an example, right? Like disfruta de un verano de comida segura. This is sort of the idea that you can create on your own, and hopefully you did. You created some sort of infographic, graphic organizer using Word, something that's and again, any medium. The medium is not really what's important. What's important is the information and the synthesis. So let's go ahead and go back to PowerPoint here. Now for our closing activity, here you're going to actually answer these questions or statements and type your responses in our session chat. So this is one way for us to ensure that you stayed here with us the whole time. And so again, you're going to answer these questions or statements. So the statement number 1 says list one media or method that you will use to roll out the content. And again, you have your Padlet there. You're synthesizing the information that we discussed this morning. You're just sort of all bringing it together. You created an infographic. So you have all of these resources in front of you. Now you just have to kind of take a step back, internalize the information that we discussed and that you created. And you're going to say, list one media or method that you will use to roll out the content. Now, the second question, how do you foresee yourself implementing instructional strategies to further support content comprehension? So think about the processes, right? What sort of activities or the rollout of your lesson, rather. How is that going to look? And then identify an effective check for understanding that you found helpful and why. So we had a few a few rollouts left. I mean, a few checking for understandings that we discussed this morning. And then in blue, it's just I want to thank you, many gracias, for allowing me the opportunity to share some information regarding the best practice. My hope is that you will consider using differentiated instruction as a tool to guide your lesson deliveries and content development. So for the next 5 minutes, please, I'm going to leave this slide up here. Answer the statement, the two statements and the question in the chat. And again, I will be around if you have any questions. I do appreciate your time this morning, and I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day and weekend. Thank you so much.